Okay, so we are recording. So one more time, everyone, we're recording. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so we'll go back up to the beginning. And I think it's about time. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Just one last time, we are recording. And before I start, I want to thank everyone. We had some really, really great feedback. When I talked to Superintendent McKinstry, one of the reasons why I wanted to be here was just because of the community and the involvement, and really the pride and the way parents are really involved with everything around here. So I want to thank all the parents for their feedback, taking the time to talk with me about this stuff. That means a lot. And so I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say that to everybody. And then again, if we don't get to all your questions, I will try. I promise to, if there's questions, I'll try to get to them. If I don't, by any chance, I can reach out to you, or please feel free to email me after this meeting if you have any other questions or concerns. And if you want to come in and talk about it, we can do a virtual. One of the things I'm just going to tell everyone too is I'd like to start doing a coffee with the principal, which would be just an informal time to come in. We'll do coffee and donuts or bagels, whatever you want. And just, it's a great time. We've done this in other schools, and it's really a nice time to come and sit down and just talk about anything that you want to talk about, any questions you have. It's really great. So I'm going to start that as well. So I'll send you more information about that. So I hopefully we'll get some people to come in and we can have some good conversations. So I'm going to get started. This obviously is about our grading policy and proficiency practices. Again, I know there was so much confusion around this, and I do apologize for the way it was laid out. I can promise everyone it was laid out with the best intentions. And so we're going to move forward and make sure that we do this in the right way. So the first thing I want to talk about is the burning question. So I sent out a survey, as you know, about 40 people responded to the survey. And then, of course, we had people on our last parent meeting. So we took all those questions, and really they came down to these 10 questions. The number one probably being the one on the top. They're sort of in order of the way that they came in, or the amount of questions around it. And so, essentially these 10 questions that you see here, I'm not going to read each one and answer for you right now, because during this presentation, we're going to talk about these, and I'm hopefully going to answer your questions about this. Again, if by any chance I don't, or there's still questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. And if you would just wait till we're most of the way through, there's probably about, 8 to 10 slides here, but some of the questions may be answered before you type it in chat. So if you just wait, and I promise to give everyone time to ask questions. I know I had some people ask why we didn't take questions the last parent meeting, because I want everyone to sort of see this and think about their questions, what you did. So thank you so much, and get your response back so I can answer them this way, and then sort of clear up some of the questions before we move forward. So these are the 10 questions that we're going to talk about today. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. The big one is the grade distribution. The 90-10, and people were confused about that, and rightly so. And they were also upset about the way it came across. And so what we're doing is, essentially this is going to go back to the way it was last year and really pre-COVID. The grade distribution. So when we originally said that we're going to do a 90-10 split, the thought was that we would have this formative summative built into that 90%, but it did get confusing. So we're going to go back. We're going to back it out to what we did last year. So that 10%, what we call independent practice, or your skills application, will still be in place. 50% of the grade will be weighted on formative assessments. And I'm going to talk about, what exactly that is in a minute. And then 40% of the grade will be based on those summative assessments. So I know a lot of parents were concerned, listen, how can you test 90% of a student's grade based on just a test? Is not fair. And so I'm going to talk about this in a way that's going to look out here. So formative assessments, again, this is 50% of a student's grade, just like last year. And I'm not going to read. Most of you know what a formative assessment is. It's essentially an assessment. We call it assessments, but we also refer to it as evidence of learning. And it's what the teacher's going to do, and it's unique to that class. So that's important that you know. So I may have, if I was teaching again, I taught ELA, so I may have a 7th grade ELA class that has different needs than my next 7th grade ELA class. So the formative assessments are going to be geared towards the students that are in front of me. So, you may see something different for one ELA class. I know Miss Bethel's here, but for example, Miss Bethel, one of her classes may be different, may be given different formative assessments than her other class. And that's because the kids are different. We talk about that fair and equal. So we want to make sure that we're being fair to the kids and we really address their needs. Formative assessments, by the way, are used by the teachers so they can guide their instruction. So some examples of formative assessments: anecdotal records, which could be student conferencing, quizzes, short essays, open responses, mini projects, lab reports for the science people, journals, reflections, group work, and guided discussions. And I do want to say this is a pretty good list, but there could be other pieces that fall into that formative assessment as well. So again, formative assessment will make up 50% of the student's grade. And then summative assessments will make up to 40% of the grade. And of course, 10% will be that SAP or independent practice grade. So summative assessments, again, they're the big test. They're going to use to identify the content and process of learning that represent the desired outcome. So, and it's important to note here, summative assessments only assess what has been taught explicitly. So it wouldn't be a pre-test, we would never give a summative test on a skill or a standard that has not been taught. So that would never be in a summative assessment. And also some examples of summative assessment would be the end of a unit chapter test, modular assessments, performance assessments. And I think the key here that we put on here, it has clear rubrics outlining what students need to know and be able to demonstrate to show success. So that's very important. And then a research paper, an essay, or some type of project. So I don't want you to think that a research paper or project would only be a formative assessment. It absolutely could be a summative assessment if it's based on what was already taught in the classroom, and again, explicitly taught. So again, some examples of a summative assessment versus a formative assessment. Independent practice, or SAP grade. So independent practice essentially is with no assistance. It's skills that the students work on with minimal or no assistance. And so that can include many different things. And again, I could go over a little bit of this, but part of the independent process, the teacher incorporates opportunities so that the independent process or practice, students have a chance to reinforce their skills and synthesize their newly acquired knowledge by completing a task or series of tasks in their own way and away from the teacher's direct guidance. I think it's really important here that we are reinforcing skills that the students have been working on. And even more important, to synthesize, we talk about blooms and how do we push kids that rigor, synthesize into something new. And then during this part of the lesson, students may need some support for the teacher. If you're in a co-taught classroom, for example, that may be where the special education teacher could be working with students there. And also the regular classroom teacher could be working in a small group with this. But this is important because it empowers students to work through problems independently before providing assistance. And I know if your students are like my kids, a lot of times, they struggle with that, or working independently. And I know when I was teaching, I used to make the mistake, I think, of I wanted to help my students and I didn't want to see them struggle too much. And so I would sort of give them leading answers or kind of point them in the right direction. And really here, we don't want to do that. We want the students to work independently and come up with their own answers. A couple of things that the teachers consider when assigning independent practice work. What activities will students be able to complete on their own? And again, this is based on the teacher's observations. So this would look different in different classes. So one class may have different needs than the other one, even though it's the same grade and the same content. Again, how can I provide a new and different context in which the students can practice their new skill? Homework would be part of that independent practice. And is included in the 10% when and if given. So students aren't always going to have homework. Some, I know math usually has more homework than other classes, so they may not have homework, but if they do, the homework would be included in part of that 10% independent practice. And I hope I'm not going too fast. Like I said, I can't see, so I'm going to try not to go too fast here. What should homework be if given? So homework assignments given for completion outside of the school day. And then we have some considerations that teachers take into account. How effectively will the assignments be done outside of the school day to advance learning? And I could use a real world example. My own son, when he was young, that he would get math work when he was in elementary school, and he couldn't do it. My son struggled a lot in math. And so the teacher would send home math work, and it would frustrate him. I can tell you there were many nights he'd be crying, and it ended up where myself or his mom would do his homework instead of him because he just couldn't get it. So the key with the homework is we don't want parents. It's not your homework. It's for the students to do to reinforce their learning. Quality versus quantity. I did a homework study in another district, and it was ironic that back years ago, many districts considered the best districts gave a lot of homework, and it was just quantity. It wasn't quality. It was just massive amounts of homework, hours a night of homework. And so here our focus is more on quality. We don't want kids spending 3 hours a night in homework. We want quality way to reinforce their learning. Again, is the task customized to meet the students' learning styles, interests, and needs? Homework, you'll see homework differentiated for students too. And will the student be able to complete the task independently? Again, like I said, we don't want to send homework where the parents have to do the homework, or we're going to frustrate the students. Another thing that happened with my son, he didn't understand what was going on, and so he would do the work wrong. And what would happen is he would reinforce the wrong way to do something and then go into class and be even further behind. So, we're really mindful of the homework that we assigned to make sure that students understand it. A formative assessment, and I know like social studies comes to mind. Many times they'll send home work from the class that students will do. If they can't complete it in the class, they will send it home for homework. So there may be projects, different reading assignments, things of that nature that may come home with your student, and that would be counted as part of that homework or grade, even though it is part of that formative assessment. And then again, this is a formative versus summative assessments. Formative assessment is an assessment for learning. Summative is an assessment of the learning. So like in this example, it's the sum of what we have learned, whereas a formative sort of guides our instruction. And again, these are just a couple blurbs in here, for parents. Formative assessment measures how a student's learning is during a unit course of study, whereas summative assessment is going to measure how much the student learned after a unit or course of study. So again, a formative assessment sort of guides that instruction. And this is basically the same way we did it last year. I think the students were successful with this last year. And so we want to make sure that we continue them on the right path. Common assessments. So we did talk about common assessments. And so one of the things that we're working on as a staff, and I have to give a huge shout out to the staff that's here tonight. They are amazing, and the work they've done has been incredible. They started this work last year, and they continue to work forward this year. And they've done an amazing job with these common assessments. So teachers are collaborating. And so this year we're really excited because our teachers have much more common planning time. They also have PLC time, and they can collaborate together and talk about those common assessments. What do those common assessments look like? And then common assessments are used to measure students' performance consistently and fairly, which are two key words, because the beautiful thing about common assessments is it's the same. This is where we're going to measure, how our student, I don't mean to keep using Miss Bethel, but she's a great teacher, so I'm going to refer to her. I know she's here, but so how does a common assessment? So if students had me for ELA and they have Miss Bethel and we gave a common assessment, Miss Bethel has 95% of her kids that show that they can get an A or a B, 80% and above, and my students are at 60% on average. Well, there's a problem with the instruction I provided. So that's a good way for me as an educator to go back and say, okay, what do I need to do different for my students? So common assessments is one of the things that all our staff is working on right now. And again, all educators teach the same knowledge and abilities and collaborate to generate assessments linked directly to the standards. And then on the right, we have some examples of common assessments, curriculum embedded performance assessments. We call those CPAs. We have CPAs. We did a lot of work on CPAs in the years prior. And so those, we still have our CPAs. We also have end of the unit chapter assessments and other assessments that are based on standards and skills taught across grade subjects. With the key here is collaborative unit series of lessons. So again, just wanted to let parents know about the common assessments. And the common assessments are things that we're working on right now. The staff is working together on those to create those common assessments, to measure the students' progress as we move forward throughout the year. Retakes was another thing I had questions on. And I want to be clear because I know some parents had concerns about barriers and some students not being able to take these retakes. So we want to make sure that all students are able to take retakes. And I think that's really important. And so if a student, and this is our policy that we started last year, if a student receives a grade that they're not satisfied with on an assessment, the student has the opportunity to get extra help from the teacher and then be reassessed. The higher grade will replace the lower grade. And I think at our last staff meeting, one of our staff members brought up a great question. They said, well, how does that help with learning? If you're just going to give me the same test, which has happened in other schools and in the past, how does that help my learning? But the important thing here is they're not just going to get the same test. So if I got an 80% on a math test from Ms. Zuliani, for example, and I want to get a better grade, Ms. Zuliani doesn't say, okay, here's the same exact test, retake it, and you'll get a better grade. What will happen is the students will learn, they meet with the teacher, they can have a tutor, but the students will have a chance to relearn the material, relearn the standards, and then they can retake the part of the test that they struggled on. The only thing I want to point out here is two things. One is students can redo any assessment if it's formative or summative. So that's important to note. And then retakes, though, have to occur within a reasonable time frame. And so that, is going to be determined by the student and the teacher. Obviously, things that would affect that would be if the student missed time from school due to an illness, we would give them more time for something like that. But students can't wait. The one thing we say is students can't wait until the end of the quarter to request to do a retake. So you can't, if I took an assessment or a formative or summative assessment in the beginning of the quarter, and now the end of the quarter rolls around and I say, oh gosh, I'm getting a 75 in class. I want to bump my grade up. I want to go back and retake those assessments from early in the quarter. That wouldn't be reasonable. And again, these are things that the teacher would discuss with the student to make sure that they can come up with a reasonable timeline for them to retake that test. The other thing, if you saw our retake form, we do ask parents to sign off on it. And that's simply to make sure parents are aware of it and they know what's going on. We would never, I can promise you, we know that there's, some students that, parents are working or they're busy. If there's a reason why the student cannot get a parent signature, we would never hold that against the student. In that case, we would just reach out to the parent and let them know what's happening. But I want to make sure that, all parents understand that we're trying to remove any barriers to those retakes. How will students be graded? We talked about this at the school committee meeting. So students are going to receive that numerical grade. It'll be based on a 0 to 100 scale for the remainder of this year. The teachers are going to continue to work on making sure all tasks and assessments are comprised of learning progressions. And we talked a little bit about that when we see, and I don't want to make it sound like MCAS is the only thing we look at to assess our students. We also have other benchmarks tests and things like that. But, we want to make sure that we line up our proficiency and our standards with what the students are learning and to make sure we really push our students, because as I've talked with some parents too, we know that there's those gaps in learning, not just among our, our struggling students or our average students, but our higher students as well. COVID really put a kibosh on a lot of things for our kids. So, we're trying to make sure we fill those gaps in. And so we want to make sure students are graded fairly. All assessments are being composed of learning progressions. The teachers will also provide students with sufficient time to finish assignments and meet those learning objectives, as well as provide students with multiple opportunities to demonstrate proficiency. or achieve success. So I do know that I've had parents reach out to us. We made a big push for UDL. We started that 2 years ago, and that's work that we'll continue to do. But if I'm a student, and again, I'll go back to my son who struggled with a pen and paper test. My daughters, would rock that out. They love a pen and paper test. My son struggled with that. So our teachers are amazing. I can't say enough good things about our staff. They're really great at understanding, hey, Johnny struggles with a pen and paper test, so we can find a different way to give him an assessment. The key is here, though, we can give you different ways to show your proficiency and achieve success, but they'll be based on the same standards or concepts that we taught. So my son may have a paper and pencil test in a class, whereas someone else may have maybe able to show it in a portfolio or a project. So we do want to make sure we give kids different ways to show that they met those learning objectives. So how will students' grades be made equitable for the first quarter? So a couple of things we talked about at our staff meeting, and these are things we're doing right now. No student will receive a grade less than 50 in any subject for the first quarter in the middle school. Again, we want to make sure that we're being fair to our students and we didn't impede their scores in any way. Teachers, we met in PLCs and a staff meeting on Tuesday this week. And the teachers, again, were great. They worked in their groups by content area to discuss. Most teachers already had the grades in a 0 to 100 grade in Infinite Campus already. Any grades that weren't on a 0 to 100 grade, the teachers met with groups, and they also meet during their CPT time to determine how we can make sure we convert that to a 0 to 100 grading scale. They're also looking at all the work the students have completed or been assessed on since the start of the quarter, and they're going back and making sure the grade on that is based on a 0 to 100, entering that into Infinite Campus. Some students, and this is important to point out, some students may have more grades than others in the same class because the grades, again, that's based on the needs of the students in front of them. But the grades they receive will have a 0 to 100 scale. And make sure we give them the appropriate weight for the assignment. So the grades will definitely reflect their progress and achievement. So I want to assure all parents that those grades will be based on a 0 to 100. And you don't have to worry about that. That's going to move forward this year. And so I want to make sure you understand that. Couple things to note. I'm not sure if I have it on my next slide. A couple things to note. You will see, because I had some parents ask me about, okay, so my student only has, one common assessment right now for a grade, and then they have a lot of SAP grades. So a lot of the stuff the teachers have been doing, they have some assessments already to go to be entered, which they will put in. Miss Palmerhouse is working, so by next week, knowing Miss Palmerhouse, she may have it done tomorrow, but at the latest next week, you're going to see, when you look in Infinite Campus, you're going to see that summative and formative breakdown. And so the teachers have been meeting to plan to see, okay, what grades are going to be moved into that formative assessment, and moving forward, how we're going to make sure we differentiate between the formative and summative assessment. So what does proficiency-based practices mean for our teachers and students right now? Again, this is proficiency-based practices. Please don't confuse that with grading. This is not standards grading or proficiency-based grading. So our teachers are going to continue to work on revising the old summative assessments and creating new assessments to measure students' acquisition of knowledge and the standards taught for a particular unit or lesson. Within these assessments, they will create specific questions, tasks that reflect student progress toward mastery of proficiency of each standard or skill within the assessment. And again, this is really, really important to see how we address and close those learning gaps, because we want to make sure that we're addressing those specific skills and standards, and we want to make sure our assessments are aligned to that as well. And so our teachers are going to continue to do that moving forward. Like I said, they started that work last year, back in the spring, early spring, they started that, and they've been moving forward with it throughout this year. So they continue to work on those summative assessments. And moving forward, I know parents had asked, okay, so what kind of support and guidance are you going to give to the staff to make sure that they're set with this and they understand this? So Our PDs have already met with Superintendent McKinstry and Ms. Healy to talk about that professional development moving forward this year. They're going to receive support and guidance to do the work in their CPTs and PLCs throughout the remainder of the school year, so that all our lesson activities and assessments are equitable and reflective of the needs, abilities, and interests of all students. So again, that work started last year. The professional development and the support started in the spring, and we're going to continue to move forward with it this year as well. So the focus moving forward on our professional development and during our PLCs and CPTs is going to continue to work on this proficiency-based practices, not grading. Okay. How will this process ultimately be reflected in the teaching, learning, and assessing? So ultimately, we want to make sure that this is tied into our students and the proficiency scales that the teachers are working on. And we want to make sure that the students are tested or assessed on the skills that were taught. And again, this will help us when we close those learning gaps, when we go back and see that where we're missing information as we move forward with that. I did include on here one sheet. And again, I am going to share this. So this will be on there because the other thing people asked about is, what kind of research is there around these proficiency-based practices? So there's 5 links on here, some information for the parents on that. And so that'll sort of help you make more sense of what we're talking about here. They're really great articles. They're pretty quick, easy to read. Of course, there's many more things out here, but we try to pick the 5 that we feel would best help support the parents and family members in here to learn that. But the big takeaway, again, is that they will have a 50-40-10 split similar to last year. And really years past is how we did that. And grades will be based on a 0 to 100. So there will not be any, 1 through 4 grades on that. And so that is the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop. We still have about 20 or 30 minutes for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing here and then go back so I can hopefully see the chat. And I'm slow with this, so bear with me, everybody. I have to, Miss Gogolinski, I'm trying to get into the chat. I can't.
Let me read you a few of the questions that I saw pop up. One was asking about how we go about getting a tutor for their student if they feel that they need one.
Yeah, you can reach out to me or your adjustment counselors, and we can set that up for you. A lot of our staff members, are willing to help with that. So reach out to me, an adjustment counselor, and we'll be happy to help you out with that.
John, can I jump in for a second on that too?
Sure.
We've been, since COVID, we've been offering buddy tutors. So we've had probably each year about 30 high school kids. I apologize. One of my smoke alarms is going off. And we're going to be starting up our buddy tutor program again at the beginning of December. We're recruiting starting about a week and a half from now. So we will also be offering that. And we offer the buddy tutors up through 8th grade. So that's also going to be an option. And they'll do it virtually or they'll come after school and meet. So that'll be an option as well.
Yeah, and one other thing, thank you. I want to add to the superintendent, our National Junior Honor Society kids. I did talk to Miss Wormuth, who's our advisor, and they will also be offering tutoring as well. So then you have that peer-to-peer tutor. And we're also talking, right now I'm talking to Miss Walker about setting up busing right now too. So again, we're trying to remove as many barriers as we can. So, between the buddy program and then the National Junior Honor Society students for the peer-to-peer tutoring, we'll have a lot of options available for people out there.
John, there is a question about asking about when students are asked to retake a retake, but they are told that they have to wait until the whole class takes it. Did you address that in your talk, that there'd be a wait time, or you said appropriate wait time?
Yes, I did not address that, but I can tell you, yes, that's a great question. I don't know who asked that, but that's a great question. So we cannot give a retake until all students have had a chance to take the test. And then again, at that point, the student can reach out to the teacher and pick a time when they could to have that retake done. And again, come up with ways that they're going to show that they mastered those standards or skills that they want to retake as well.
Mr. Dioro, I think that might be an area that we need to have further discussion on. Because I do feel like, I agree with this parent that if a student is learning a concept and they have to wait several weeks to retake that test of material that they learned at that time while it's fresh in their mind, if in fact the retakes are only going to be based off of the questions or the standards or the skills that they did poorly on and not a whole retake of the entire test, it doesn't seem necessary for them to have to wait till the entire class takes it. So that might be something we want to talk a little bit more with the department chairs about.
Yeah, and I know Ms. Hall I saw part of your question about students should never have to take weeks to redo their test. So I want to make sure that, we'll definitely address that. If we should not be waiting weeks to retake a test. I agree with that.
Another question that came in was asking, with the grades currently in Infinite Campus, who is determining what category those few grades are going to going into with the restructuring?
So the teachers met. That's another great question. So the teachers met during PLCs this week, and they're continue to meet during CPT time and PLC time to talk about that. So the teachers are going to decide, they're going to collaborate on that, and they're going to decide what grades should go into that formative assessment category, what grades would go into that SAP or independent practice category, and of course the summative assessments. But so the teachers are deciding that by content. So I'm not sure who asked that, but it'll be a group decision by content.
And there are some statements in there about the educational backing of that, but those were typed in prior to sharing that slide with those links, how to support proficiency. So I don't know if that can address it.
Okay.
But there was a common question here. This is, are common assessments being used as a grade? In the example you gave, it sounds like it's more of an assessment on a teacher. So if the whole class gets a 60, I'm hoping that's not being used as a grade.
Yeah, so common assessments are being used as a grade. I gave an extreme example. And so, if the whole class, so again, when I was an educator or when I was teaching, I always looked at any assessments I gave as a reflection on me as well as the students to help me guide my instruction. So I gave an extreme example. If a whole class got a 60, I would imagine that the teacher would know that something went wrong there and that they would redo that test and let the students have another chance to show mastery in that. I shouldn't have gave that much of an extreme example. That I don't know. I'm sure that could happen, but that would be a rare example.
John, can I add on to that too?
Of course.
So with the common assessments, the goal of it is that the purpose of it, I should say, is that they're created before the teacher teaches. So the teachers that teach, say, 8th grade English, and they're doing a unit on a novel, Ender's Game, whatever, and they've got 6 or 7 focus standards that they're going to be working on. They create a common assessment at the beginning of the unit before they teach it. And that way it guides their teaching. So they know what the assessment is and what they need to make sure that the kids are able to know and do by the end of the unit. So then at the end of the unit, all students get that common assessment to measure what they have taught. So it can have a twofold purpose: to be a grade, because it should be a sum of learning after the students have been explicitly taught those standards. But it can also be kind of a measure for teachers to make sure that they've taught all those standards. And if they haven't, and they notice that students in their classes overall don't do well, that's their opportunity to look at the test and say, okay, where did our students not perform well? It's the same thing we do with MCAS. Every time we get the results back every year, we look at all the test questions, and we look at how our students performed on every single test question, and we analyze that. Why didn't they perform well? How could we have taught it better so that more students would have gotten that answer right? So it does have a twofold purpose.
There's a question here that says, I know that for algebra class, the test is being made by the math department. How are they addressing the different paces of the classes in different houses? So I guess vertical alignment.
Sorry, I had my mic off. Yeah, so that is being addressed again during their CPTs and NPLCs. And I know that the algebra teachers are working really hard to make sure they align that. I know that there are classes that may be in different areas, but they're making sure that they align what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. And there's going to be opportunities again, so each class is different. If they need to go back and reteach concepts or spend more time, they're going to do that. But I know algebra moves pretty quickly, and so they meet almost every day. The algebra teachers, they meet right down the hall from me, actually. And so they are working on that right now to make sure that they address that.
Another question in the chat says that as of right now, my child has a few classes with 1 or 2 items in assessment part and maybe 4 in the independent practice. With only a few weeks left in the quarter, is there some sort of expectation of a number that should be under each category?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We told the staff we don't have an expectation of a certain number that they should be putting in there. What we did say is meet as a team in your content area and determine what you feel is best going to show what the students have learned. So we didn't say a specific number. We want the teachers themselves to come up with it. And they have many different things that they can add. And that's where they're going to go back and add and say, okay, what should be moved into that formative assessment part? What would stay in that independent practice? So they're doing that based on the content area.
Okay, and this question is a follow-up with the expectations of a tutor. They're asking, what are the expectations of the tutor? Is that a weekly thing, or maybe to expand? I know you mentioned Stuco and you mentioned.
Yeah, it could be weekly. It would be depending on the student or the parent and the tutor. They would set that up, however they want. I know Stuco or National Junior Honor Society kids are going to be here on a weekly basis. So if you wanted to, you could meet with them on a weekly basis. But again, that would be between the tutor and the student.
It's the same with the buddy tutors as well. The parent and the buddy tutor and the student decide, how much time and in what subject areas. So it may be that a buddy tutor is tutoring, one buddy tutor is tutoring a student in math on one day, and then another buddy tutor is tutoring them in English on another day. Or if they really have some math deficiencies, they do twice a week for math. So that can be something that's decided between the parent and the tutor.
Yeah, and if I could just add to, all our teachers stay after at least 1 day a week. So a great opportunity for the students to stay. They can certainly meet with their teacher 1 day a week and then stay with the tutor a different day. That would be great too. I know some students take advantage of that as well.
This question says, why are common assessments being used as an assessment and not as a tool for teachers on the areas that students are struggling in? Shouldn't these assessments be used to gather baseline data and then see if students grow or remain the same?
Yeah, so I'll go back to what the superintendent said. So the teachers make up these common assessments before they start to teach. So the kids are taught explicitly to those common assessments. So again, it's sort of both. It's going to assess what the students have learned, and then it's also going to, let the teachers know how they are, and so they can help guide their instruction. The quicker, I guess I should say, feedback is those formative assessments, because they're given more often and they're smaller, quicker assessments. So that's going to guide the instruction. So when it comes to a common assessment, which is usually bigger and given at the end of a unit or chapter or what have you, they've already given formative assessments along the way to guide that. So by the time we get to a common assessment, our hope is that students wouldn't be struggling and that we have taught them what they need to know for those common assessments or any summative assessment. It's not just common assessments. I should say it's any summative assessment.
Ms. Palmerhouse had written in the chat that she's also asked teachers to stop inputting grades this week until we formalize the new percentages. so that if you're not seeing something in these last couple of days, that we'd kind of hold off when we were making these final decisions.
Thank you, Ms. Palmerhouse.
And then there's a question here that are retakes allowed to happen during school hours, like at lunch or when, or only after school?
That's going to be up to the teacher to decide. Again, it's going to be what's best for the student. We don't want to say that you can only take it after school. So when would be an opportunity for them to take a retake. Advisory would be another one, or there could be time in class. So I'm not sure who asked that question, but yeah, that's really good. So it's not only after during school hours. It could be after school. Again, we want to make sure we give our students opportunities to take those retakes. So we'll work around the schedule as best as we can. Oh, I see this thing. I see it coming up. 2 weeks, I think, Miss Hall.
November 4th is the change of the quarter.
Thank you, Ms. Poland. And again, hopefully that I would love to again meet with the parents on a more informal basis to come in and ask questions, and please feel free to reach out at any time with questions. I don't want you to think that we can only address this during a parent meeting. So any questions you have, reach out anytime. And again, like I said, if you'd like to come in, or we could do a phone conversation or virtual, anything that's best for you guys. I love the involvement with the parents and how you guys want to be part of this process. So please, anything we could do to work together would be great. I'm sure you'll have, as we get ready to wind down, I'm sure you'll think of more questions tonight after we log off, and just shoot us an email, Ms. Palmerhouse, myself, and we'll answer them as quick as we can for you. And again, like if you'd like to meet in person, we'd be happy to do that. I know Ms. Palmerhouse and myself, we love to meet with parents in person, but I know it's not convenient always for you, so we can do phone calls, virtual, after school, whatever works best for you. And I did talk to one parent too. Please, if you would, I'd love feedback after this too. What we can do better, what worked, what didn't work. I really appreciate your feedback. So even if you don't have a question, but if you have some feedback that we can make this better for you, the meetings, anything, we really love your feedback. And so please feel free to give that too. We would really appreciate it. The awkward silence is always unnerving. I won't keep you too long. Again, if after we log off, if there's more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. But you'll see those adjustments being made soon. Again, anything we can do to. I know there's one parent in particular I'm hoping to talk to tomorrow to get some feedback on. But we really appreciate your feedback and your patience with all this. That means a lot. And then
I wanted to know if the PowerPoint would be sent out as a reference along with the recording.
Yes.
So those links would be live. I think that last slide has some live links on it.
Yes, Miss Alden. Yeah, as much information as I can put out there, I will definitely put out there for parents. And then just in case, so just a few minutes, I just want to add that the students have been doing great. The PBIS has been a big hit. The kids love getting their rewards, so that's been great to see. We really love working with the kids there. It's really been the kids are doing a tremendous job. We just had our Student of the Month awards. And again, we talk about this, Ms. Palmerhouse, Mr. Stein, and myself. We have great kids because we have great parents. There's no secret to that. I've been in some districts where we have some tough kids and we have some tough parents. So we really appreciate you guys. And then I am going to send out a parent newsletter probably either Friday or Monday. But just since you're here, I'm going to tell you we're doing another Alice tabletop drill with Officer DeJordi. I know he's here tonight. And I'm going to send out information about that too. this student safety is our number one priority. I know academics are right up there, but student safety is really our number one priority. So we're going to be doing some more Alice training and some more tabletop exercises, which I will be sending out to you Friday or Monday. So I'll give you an update on that as well. But I really appreciate you coming tonight and sharing your thoughts tonight. I'm not seeing any new questions, so I'm going to log off. And again, if you think of anything else, Miss Bethel, I suggest reaching out. Okay, thanks, Miss Bethel. If you can see Miss Bethel in the chat, she's suggesting reaching out to your child's teachers with specific content-related questions about Q1 grade adjustments, if you want more specific, so they can fill you in exactly what's happening. Again, I know Miss Bethel's here, but and we have Miss Kelly and some other teachers here, but the staff is amazing. Miss Gogolinski. The teachers have been doing a tremendous job. I can't say enough good things about them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please share any feedback tomorrow. We'd really appreciate it. And again, any other questions, let us know, and we'll address them as quick as we can. But I hope this answers some of your questions. And really, we want you to feel more at ease and the students as well. So I can tell you that. One thing before we go. So teachers are discussing this with the students. So no one asked, but in case you want to know, the teachers are going to be discussing this or have already started discussing this with the students. So they're aware of what's going on as well. And so we're trying to make sure everybody's on the same page as we move forward. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks to the superintendent for being here tonight. We really appreciate it, Miss Healy. It's great to sort of see everybody tonight, but have a great night, everybody. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you so much. Good night.